When Barack Obama did executive orders, we were screaming. We said it was abuse of power. Now we eat them like they're Tic Tacs.
Republicans, dudes, it's beginning to look like you get off on this too. It's like GOP BDSM.
Republicans just blew it. We waited till a gun was pointed at our heads to even do something.
The bar is closing. It's 2 a.m. There's two people left. They're eyeing each other and they're like, are we going to do this? Welcome to Political Rehab, Smart Politics without the hangover. I'm Matt.
And I'm Matt.
Today, a healthcare epic fail, a fine line between stupid and clever in Venezuela, a desperate affordability pivot, a cash handout ploy, and the saddest hookup in history. Oof. Plus, we'll deep dive the story that's got political insiders losing their minds, our That's Bullshit segment on getting high, actually, and a really fun tribute to director Rob Reiner. But let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump.
That's right. Time for the Trump dump, the segment where we get it all out of our system up front so we can go on to have a good show. As I've said before, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, it doesn't matter. There's something Trump did that pissed you off this week. But I'm thinking about that, Matt. Did anything happen this week? Feels like quiet week. I don't know if Trump said anything. Oh, right. There's that disgusting post about Rob Reiner. I could have used that as my Trump dump, but I think most sane people agree his brutal murder wasn't the moment to settle political scores. I could have talked about watching Republicans like Senator Mark Wayne Mullins find a way to defend it, or others in MAGA who dismiss it as just a mean tweet. That's unconscionable, but truthfully, it's just classic cult behavior. No, that's not my Trump dump. Mine comes from the hot mess of a speech he gave to the nation this week. Manic, combative, almost 19 minutes where he did nothing but yell at the nation. It was supposed to be a reset, a quiet admission that, yeah, affordability is a real problem. And finally, the president was going to do something with it. Part of his affordability tour. Instead, we got a full-blown Biden-era gaslighting on the economy, the exact same delusional messaging that destroyed Democrats in 2024. Of course, he talked about tariffs, his favorite word, which, newsflash, are a major reason we have an affordability problem. I'm just going to say this again. Tariffs are a tax on the American people. So there I was, watching a Republican president in prime time brag about raising taxes. We are in bizarro world. Now, there are a lot of other things we could criticize, but honestly, this speech was a masterclass in what not to do as a leader. Deny reality, blame everyone else, and take zero responsibility. And worst of all, it was a massive missed opportunity. No new policy, no vision. He had the bully pulpit and a chance to rally the country. Instead of connecting with Americans, instead of course correcting as approval rating sinks to 38%, he just played the same deranged MAGA hits in prime time. That's not going to help Republicans win elections. That's not going to give hope to Americans. And it sure as hell is not going to make America great again.
And for mine, I have to point to a Trump dump that got its stink all over the rest of the Republican Party. This week, House Republicans deposed Jack Smith, the Justice Department's special counsel, who was previously looking into the January 6th crimes committed by Donald Trump and the classified documents case. To be sure, this wasn't about oversight or any real investigation by this House committee. It was about forcing the Republican Party to relitigate two of Donald Trump's now defunct criminal cases long after prosecutors have laid out the facts. By the way, remember, he's still a convicted felon in New York in another case. Never forget that. Now, here's a quote from a lawyer familiar with the cases. Jack Smith was once my adversary in a high-profile investigation of a Republican client. In that investigation, Smith proved himself to be fair, impartial, and fearlessly committed to the facts and the law. He was unmotivated by partisan politics, but recent attacks on Smith are motivated by partisan politics, and they are untethered to the facts or the law. That wasn't some Democrat. That was former Trump lawyer John Dowd, and that speaks for itself. It's bad enough that Trump has made Republicans walk these kinds of planks where they have to lie and defend the indefensible until all but the most brazen of them are dying of shame inside. Remember, even Marjorie Taylor Greene eventually cracked under the strain of all this. It's that when it comes to Trump's worst sins, he keeps making Republicans go back and defend him over and over. The Russia conspiracy, his tariff disaster, even him falling asleep in meetings. He makes his minions go out and take bullet after bullet for him. Sidebar, why does he get off on this? I mean, seriously. And more pointedly, like, Hey, Republicans, dudes, it's beginning to look like you get off on this too. It's like GOP BDSM. To be clear, while Trump is innocent until proven guilty, the public record is self-evident. According to the January 6th committee's final report, Trump knowingly spread false claims of election fraud. He pressured officials. He summoned supporters to Washington. He told them to march to the Capitol and fight like hell, and then failed to act for hours as the violence unfolded. In the Mar-a-Lago documents case, again, crystal clear. The dispute was never whether he had those documents illegally. It's whether he returned them. He didn't. He refused to. Jack Smith was appointed to take the politics out of this. That's the point of an independent special counsel. And look, if Trump wants to spend the rest of his life in loud denial, like he's OJ combing the golf courses of America for the real killers, that's his own miserable, pathological business. But keep the rest of us the hell out of it, especially the Republican Party. This is like the movie Edge of Tomorrow, where they have to live out their own grisly death every day. The rest of us are stuck in it. The healthiest thing would be for Trump to let the poor, hapless Republicans go. And if he won't, let's hope that the great Republican spinal transplant surgery is a success, and more of them will finally tell him no.
Fantastic. I have been writing about this for a long time. You can't deny that he's in these legal troubles. There's been 4,000 lawsuits brought against him or his organization. You just have to accept that this is true. You don't have to care, but you have to accept it. So we need to stop denying it. Great trumped up. Great.
Yes, that's the first path in a 12-step program is acceptance. Acceptance that you've got a problem in the first place. All right. With that, let's get to our rundown. I want to point out as we get into this week's rundown that in honor of the passing of Rob Reiner, we are theming each of our rundown topics with a classic quote from a Rob Reiner movie. And in this case, it's "You fell victim to one of the classic blunders." And that is seemingly what is happening with the Republican Party's ACA Epic Fail over the past week. This week, the enrollment deadline for ACA marketplaces passed, and Republicans responded with their version of eating overdone steak with ketchup while the Capitol burned, issuing thoughts and prayers for the 24 million Americans who are about to get slammed with huge healthcare price spikes before skipping town. The Republicans seemingly have come up with no real serious legislative solution, and that has left all of these Americans in the lurch. And in a final, the unkindest cut of all denouement, 4 Republican House members belatedly decided to sign on to a discharge petition to try to force House Speaker Mike Johnson to bring the Democrats' proposal just to extend these subsidies to the floor before also skipping town. Matt, not a great look for your party.
Republicans blew it, just blew it. We waited till a gun was pointed at our heads to even do something. Look, it's not that the legislation they passed this week, it's never going to make it through the Senate. Meanwhile, prices are going up. And in a month from now, we run into the risk of another partial government shutdown where we're just going to relive this over and over again. I know we're on Rob Reiner, but this kind of feels like Groundhog Day for me. But if we're being honest, look, and truthfully, Democrats are not trying to fix this problem either, but they have the upper hand, and Republicans, we just drank the poison.
I think Democrats are trying pretty hard to fix this problem. They did shut down the whole federal government for 5 weeks over it. I think the quote is really on the nose here from the Princess Bride. The classic blunder here is Republicans have known for months that this was ultimately going to be in their laps. They're going to have to do something here. Their response, as I covered in last week's That's Bullshit segment, was to come up with an alternative that amounted to really thin gruel. It wasn't an alternative at all. People facing tens of thousands of dollars in potential healthcare insurance costs being offered $1,000 or up to $1,500 in alternative tax credits. Just an insane, meant to be a fig leaf that wasn't ever going to work. And in the meantime, you've got these 4 House Republicans deciding to cover their asses at the very last minute by saying, oh yeah, let's do what the Democrats wanted to do all along at the last minute after the deadline had passed. Just absolutely shambolic.
Horrible. So this next one, it's such a fine line between stupid and clever. From This Is Spinal Tap. Just seemed to fit perfectly this Venezuela blockade. On December 16th, Trump posted on Truth Social, Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. It will only get bigger. And the shock to them will be like nothing they've ever seen before. And this line is just perfect until such time as they return to the United States of America, all the oil, land, and other assets they previously stole from us. I'm not going to read the rest of this. I will just end with thank you for your attention to this matter. Matt, is this brilliant? Is this the right move? What are we doing here?
Last week, you said that the Trump administration was cosplaying as pirates for our seizing of the Venezuelan oil tanker. Now I think we've gone full Independence Day. We are essentially the alien ravagers saying, we want your land, we want your water, we want to eat you. That is it. We will not rest until every man, woman, and child is served on a plate in an American household. Take that, affordability crisis. It's so insane that it really does almost hit that fine line between stupid and clever. The core of this is obviously extraordinarily serious because we've gone beyond, like, people in Washington euphemize about this. The media euphemizes. There are serious questions about whether war crimes have been committed. No, there aren't. There are no questions. We have committed war crimes. We have done things that are illegal based on international treaties that we signed on to prevent atrocities. And at some point, the great Republican spinal transplant surgery might take hold. It did seem to make a little bit of inroads with the requirement in the recently passed Defense Act that the critical video get released. So there's a little bit of pushback coming from Congress, but Congress has got to rein the president in. This is absolute madness.
But they're not going to do it. And that's the real problem here. Don't forget, this president ran that we were going to get out of foreign conflicts. He bragged at his primetime address how he's ending wars. But what he continues to fail to overlook is it almost feels like we're starting a new one. We're starting a new conflict. We've classified fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. And so we use that as justification now to take oil. It does remind me of trying to take Greenland from earlier this year and some of the other over-aggressive things we're going to do. It's time for Republicans in Congress to reassert their congressional authority. We cannot declare war without them. It is time for them to do it. I think this is probably going to be one of the stupidest things that we see happening.
Let's talk about the great Republican affordability pivot. And our motivating quote here is, America isn't easy. America is advanced citizenship. Part of advanced citizenship is leading through your rhetoric. You've already alluded to this in your Trump dump. Donald Trump addressed the nation last night to give the hostage video version of his affordability tour stump speech, which he tried to repeat White House talking points phonetically and loudly while assuring Americans that his captors are treating him well. He mostly blathered about how fucking terrible Joe Biden was and how awesome a job he's done. Hint, inflation as of yesterday was exactly the same rate that when Joe Biden left office. This morning's release, we're recording this on a Thursday, showed it slowing slightly, probably because the shutdown hurt the overall economy and it didn't resolve the ACA subsidy issue, which is going to lead to more price spikes. The White House also deployed J.D. Vance this week to clean up on aisle Trump, as they are wont to do. He gave a slightly more polished version of the affordability tour. Matt, my pointed question to you, in all seriousness, is this pivot to affordability going to work for Donald Trump and his party?
Clearly the White House, and in the White House, non-Trump, in the White House, they have decided that we must pivot to affordability. It's the right message. It just feels like Trump doesn't want to do it. He's going to go kicking and screaming to try to make you believe that what he's actually doing works. Again, you mentioned J.D. Vance went out on tour. You see all the Republican talking points went out there. Everyone was on the news yesterday getting ready for the primetime address. Like they had all the right messages, were saying the right things. It's just Trump himself doesn't feel like he actually wants to do it. And so we have two competing views. You have what the White House wants, you have what Trump wants, and then there's the third one. You got Republicans who are up for re-election this year that we're going to get slaughtered if we just keep pretending that there is nothing to see here. Biden tried it. It failed. If we try it, it's just going to go worse.
Right. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We have 10 years of receipts of Trump being in political office or running for political office where he does the same thing over and over again. He's going to keep stepping on the same rakes because deep in his core, he keeps saying the quiet part out loud. He doesn't believe any of this. He doesn't believe affordability is a problem. He believes it's a hoax. He believes it's a, quote, Democrat hoax. And if his heart is not in it, it's going to keep straying back to where his heart wants to go, which is to crush his enemies and to grab at every piece of shiny gold that he can possibly get his hands on. That's all he's about. That's all he cares about. And his entire approach is going to devolve back to let them eat cake. This is absolutely going to fail.
But here's one of the things he thinks is going to help. He's going to give away cash. He mentioned he's going to give all active duty military a $1,776 bonus honor our 250th anniversary. Checks are already being printed. Let's ignore the fact that Congress has to appropriate funds. I'm sure there's some loophole in why he could do it. And I am not against giving the military more money. But what it does is you have that, and then we have the $2,000 stimulus checks that come from tariff rebates. We are spending these tariff dollars over and over again. There was something last week or earlier this week that said we've taken in $18 trillion in tariff revenue, which is mathematically impossible. We only trade at 4.1 trillion, so it'd be 450% tariffs. It's not true, but we're spending the dollars over and over again. Matt, it's Oprah. You get cash, you get a check. Is this going to work? I mean, when Harry met Sally, I'll have what she's having.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want more money? And that was the whole thesis underlying Republicans' failed attempt to try to shunt the public's attention when it comes to health insurance subsidies over to their health savings account ploy, which, as I covered earlier, $1,000, $1,500 for what is actually a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 problem for households it's pretty thin gruel. Now, to be clear, Republicans have a better history than Democrats of deploying this political tactic. George W. Bush famously did it. Barack Obama famously screwed it up when it came to the stimulus during the Great Recession. He didn't send out a check with his name on it. And I will tell you, Democrats at the time, I was working on Capitol Hill for a close ally of his, and we were all secretly like screaming at the White House, dude, take the credit. So sure, it can work. People do like to get money, but at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to be able to solve $5,000, $10,000 problem, which is the cost of living increase that real American families, middle-class families, are experiencing with a $1,776 check. And I will believe these tariff payoff checks when I see them.
Yeah. And the real problem for Republicans, too, is let's not forget, we're blowing up the debt with this. The money just doesn't exist. This is fake make-believe money. So we're literally just writing more checks. And as a massive giveaway, an election year payoff, now we both know it's going to be Trump's big face on it with signature. There's going to be no doubt that this is coming from Donald Trump, and it's going to happen probably August, September of next year, but it's still a disaster for fiscal responsibility.
I would like to talk about the question of whether Mighty Mouse could beat Superman. That's from the classic Stand By Me. Oh gosh, what a great movie. We'll talk more about that later. There is a new poll out from Newsweek, which regularly publishes my writing, which you can find on worthknowing.substack.com, showing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez versus J.D. Vance in a hypothetical 2028 matchup. And for the first time ever, AOC besting the bearded one. They are pumping this up as this could be the matchup that we're going to see. And for the first time, AOC is winning it. It reminds me a little bit, Matt, of that situation where the bar is closing. It's 2 a.m. Everyone else has gone home and there's two people left. They're eyeing each other and they're like, are we going to do this? This is sad, but I guess we're going to do this. So is this the greatest political matchup that your political heart could possibly ever pine for?
I mean, I think it's the matchup nobody wanted. Quite frankly, nobody wants this. What it reminds me of, I don't know if you remember the old Brewster's Millions with John Candy and Richard
Oh,
Pryor,
yes,
where
yes.
he had to spend $30 million to get $300 million, and he decided to run for mayor of New York, but he didn't want the job. So he ran ads all across the country. He said, none of the above. That's what I want to see here. None of the above. We clearly have a problem in our nominating system if these are going to be the two best options. I hope she becomes the Democratic nominee, but I also hope we nominate a normal person who get elected, because if it's JD Vance, it's we're all going to hold our noses. It's going to be a horrible matchup. And I don't know if America is going to really like that.
Things are not looking promising with Gavin Newsom's recent troll turn online, right? We might have a very ugly, sclerotic, weird 2028 presidential race as the Republican Party tries to figure out its post-Trump future, and people grab and try and cross over different swim lanes within the party, and who's the MAGA heir apparent, who's getting endorsed, and who's the it could be very messy. Look, JD Vance is a soulless, chameleonic figure who doesn't seem to have any ideology, values, or core beliefs. He's not who I would want to see. He does show occasional flashes of compassion, humanity, and he's clearly very intelligent. So I guess from that standpoint, we could do worse. I know we could do worse because of the current occupant of the Oval Office. On the Democratic side, I will say for AOC, while politically she's not my cup of tea as a Democrat, she has matured. She's showed more restraint and thoughtfulness in recent years than, which is understandable, right? Like, we all mature, we all get better at what we do. So I have to give her props for that. And who knows, maybe by 2028, she'll be the nominee we need. On that note, let's get to a new segment. We're going to do a deep dive.
Let's do a deep dive.
We do want to do a deep dive this week. We like to rotate our longer segments at this part of the show. And we thought that this week we just had to talk about the topic that's consuming political insiders and most of Washington, which is the off the hook interview that White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles gave over the course of a year to Vanity Fair, in which she said some pretty eye-grabbing things. Let me give you a quick TLDR. Wiles said that Trump has an alcoholic's personality. She described Vice President J.D. Vance as a longtime, I believe she said, decade-long conspiracy theorist. She called Office of Management and Budget Director and Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 veteran Russell Vought a, quote, right-wing absolute zealot. She criticized Attorney General Pam Bondi's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files as having completely whiffed it. She admitted that she had tried and failed to temper some of Trump's impulses, like his blanket pardons for January 6th defendants and offenders, but was overruled. And she acknowledged clearly that Trump is motivated by political retribution in some of his political prosecutions, and that he is just on a vendetta to go after his political opponents with the full force of the federal government and the legal system. We want to unpack this a little bit. Let me start with point number one. I think you and I agree that most of what she's saying here, if not 100%, is very true and very full of proof. Is anything off base here?
I don't think so. We actually toyed with the idea of using that as our rundown topics, but we sort of realized that what we would say was like, no, you're right. No, you're right. No, that's right. We figured nobody wants to listen to that. What struck me about this is who Susie Wiles is. Not only is she the White House Chief of Staff, she's a seasoned political operative. She's a real pro, very respected. I've never worked with her, but I know a lot of people who have. And in this business, there are not many people that get glowing from your colleagues. She is good at what she does.
Yeah, even Democrats, I will say, if they don't like her, they respect her. They know she's a serious professional and she's very good at it.
Right. And so when you take it with this, it is not a Project Veritas undercover video. She sat down, I think, with 11 interviews, recorded along the way, you got to ask the question,
Mm.
why did she say this? And
Again, we agree. You go down the list of the most eye-grabbing things she said. Alcoholic's personality, check. JD Vance is a conspiracy theorist, check. Russell Vought is a right-wing absolute zealot, check. I have written this up in Newsweek. It's on my Substack. Read about it if you want more detail. Pam Bondi whiffed, checked. And it's so obvious. I mean, we can't verify that she's tried to temper some of Trump's impulses, but the fact that he is pursuing a political vendetta against his enemies list is obvious. This reminds me, I went
it's
to
clear.
Ardmore College, and it's a very notoriously nerdy school. We were playing our rivals in basketball, and the crowd was chanting at us, freaks and geeks, freaks and geeks. And we all looked around and we're like, you got us. What are we going to say? Jocks and cool people? No, this is absolutely true. But so what about the why? Well, you were about to go somewhere with that.
Yeah.
What is motivating her? Because as you say, this was premeditated.
Yeah, I think it's deliberate. Like, I think what she did is a deliberate strategy. And I think it's probably a couple things. One, I think she's sending a clear message. And we saw Trump do this with True Social Post, the Pam Bondi. It's not uncommon for this administration to send a message. I think Susie Wiles is the enforcer here a little bit. She used this to rein in Vance and Bondi. I think this was all part of the plan. Look, we've both worked in politics for a long time. In order to do an interview with a reporter, a senior member of the White House, chief of staff, they go through a lot of layers. Everybody knew about it.
Yes.
Not something that just happened. And so my guess is this is a deliberate, this is a message. This is sending a clear message to at least those two, at least Pam Bondi and JD Vance. I think second, it's a little bit to kind of bring some normalcy, if you will, to the White House. We love the palace intrigue, but to have an adult in the room like Susie Wiles gives a lot of people comfort. And I think part of this is her saying the things that she said kind of reinforces to a lot of Americans, no, it's just not a bunch of crazy sycophants. There are people in here that are adults. To see someone like Susie Wiles give an inside look and to say, no, this isn't all by design. One of the things she talked about, tariffs are way worse than they thought this was going to be. They wanted more time. They couldn't even come to an agreement on tariffs. I think it's just an adult in the room right now.
I have a slightly more cynical view than you do because I think about who's the audience here. She gave this to Vanity Fair, and the word vanity is right in the title of the publication. This is the kind of political profile that insiders do because they're trying to elevate their own profile and they like the appearance on the cover. This is not for a wide audience. This is not for middle America. This is aimed at and for political insiders, for the kinds of people who are now losing their shit over this. And the message is to them. What message is she sending? I think you're right that it's about, I'm the adult in the room, but I think it's more about creating a little bit of historical distance from the absolute batshit craziness going on inside this White House and to say, hey, I tried to restrain him with the pardons. I will acknowledge and I will not defend the indefensible when it comes to his political retribution campaign. I think that Russell Vought is a freaking nut job. Establishing all these points on the record in a sliver publication that's aimed right at the inside of the Beltway, that's a way of saying, I'd still like to be employable in the future. I'm not a crazy person. This is me auditioning for my next job. I think this is about her and protecting her own ass.
We both know there's also a lot of layers on why you do an interview like that. And I think you're probably right. I think there is a little bit of historical moment to it. There's also, and it's a classic White House move, is give it to something like this and let the press just feed on it, just feed and feed. Again, I don't believe anything she said is not something Donald Trump knew was coming. I don't think she went off script that much. Even the line where Trump believes he can do anything as president. It's interesting when you watch it on Republican side because they don't seem to want to address it too much. And what's sad about this is this was their hall pass. This was their opportunity for each of those Republicans to be like, yeah, no, she's right. I wish we didn't do this, but they still didn't take it. And I think that goes back to the spineless Republicans So I think her audience was multiple.
Yeah, and she's knifing.
Yeah,
She's actively knifing. You talked about the sad part of this. I think what's sad about this is at any other point in American history, if you had a White House chief of staff openly acknowledging that the president of the United States was pursuing a corrupt political vendetta against his enemies, this is why Nixon was impeached. This is why Trump was impeached the first time. The White House chief of staff has just admitted this on the record. And what Republicans are doing is they're saying, yep, nothing to see here. And so that's the sad part of this, because in any other era, that White House chief of staff would have to be a sacrificial lamb and immediately fired and disavowed. Or if you admit this, then it's impeachment time. But let's talk about where that takes us. Is this just a flash in the pan? They don't mind having palace intrigue stories because it's a hell of a lot better than substance stories about what's going on in America. Does this have any lasting impact beyond the next few days?
No, I don't think it does. And it was always designed to be a good end of the year story. It's a Spotify unwrapped for the palace intrigue, like you said. You're right. In any other era, we would see her resign, fired, or impeachment with this. I think Americans, they're sick and tired of seeing this. And the fact that it's just in their face all the time feels like a White House that's just trying to grow its executive muscle. And as Republicans, we used to be against this. So when Barack Obama did executive orders, we were all over that. We were screaming. We were angry. We said it was abuse of power. Now we eat them like they're Tic Tacs. One of the things that the Susie Wiles interview did was just kind of confirm that there is this feeling in there of an ever-growing executive who feels emboldened to do whatever he wants to do. And as a story itself, I don't think we see it much past early next year.
I don't think it's going to make it to the new year, but I don't see this being like a public facing story. I don't think that the average American is going to hear much more about this. Where I do think it's going to resonate is in inside circles among Republican donors, among Republican operatives, as people position for the future of the party past Trump. And she is trying to knife Russell Vought, diminish his role, knife J.D. Vance, diminish his role.
The other thing is I advise Republican candidates, and it creates an interesting problem in the trenches, because these are questions we have to address when talking to voters. And it's very difficult right now for Republicans to maneuver around it. You would like to say, yes, that's true. Yes, that's it. But the reality is there's still the way the system works, and we got to win primaries and then generals. And then when we get to debates, Democrats are going to bring this up as well. It creates headache after headache. And from a Republican perspective, it makes it harder for Republicans to win.
On that note, let us go to our weekly segment where we look at the thing that pervades most of America. And this week, it's another cloud that's really hanging over America.
Bullshit. 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 Bullshit.
Bullshit?
President Donald Trump is on the verge of a significant move when it comes to cannabis.
President Trump could sign an executive order Thursday that would reclassify it from a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3. That kind of reclassification could impact how marijuana is researched and used for medical purposes.
This is part of a massive overall change.
In the 1980s, if you were arrested for having 100 marijuana plants, you would receive the same penalty as someone found in possession of 100 grams of heroin. In 1996, California passed Proposition 215, allowing the legal sale of medicinal marijuana for patients with AIDS, cancer, and other diseases. Which brings us to today. 26 states and counting have legalized marijuana in some capacity.
Unfortunately, the entire debate about how to treat this drug has become suffused with bullshit. As medical use, decriminalization, and eventually legalization became more and more popular, and as businesses began to gain a foothold and eventually a tremendous amount of market clout, the public's basic understanding has gotten twisted by people with political and financial interests. So let's separate out some of the bullshit on these three key points. Is it safe? Is it addictive? And do we even know what we're talking about when it comes to cannabis? And let me say up front that there are pieces of the story that people advocating for the loosening of marijuana laws have long pointed out that are definitely not bullshit. One of them is that the highly restrictive laws around cannabis definitely come from historic accidents and even bias.
Those against the drug used pot's association to frighten mainstream America.
They changed the name to marijuana. They made it sound like a Spanish word.
The campaign against the so-called evil weed culminated in Congress passing the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, which essentially prohibited the sale and use of cannabis throughout America.
It's also true that some of the impetus behind medical marijuana laws 20 years ago came from genuine compassion and concern.
A prescription called Sativex is approved in Canada and the UK to relieve the symptoms of MS. We also, in the US, use Marinol, a liquid synthetic form of THC, to help with the side effects of chemo treatment in cancer patients.
But here's where the bullshit comes in. After a number of states agreed to allow cannabis for medicinal purposes, and after there was apparently little harm and potentially some good being done, by the mid-2010s, a combination of legalization advocates and business interests funded massive lobbying at the state level emphasizing potential economic benefits and some legitimate social justice arguments about the unfairness of incarcerating disproportionately Black and Latino offenders under drug laws for cannabis violations. They said, this is much safer, it's not addictive, and we know what we're dealing with here. So, let's look at all of those. First, is it safe?
I see patients who come to the ER with serious complications feeling like they're going to die. Reactionary cyclic vomiting, paranoia, anxiety, palpitations.
One particularly troubling condition is something that I've witnessed when I was hospitalized and the patient next to me in the ER could not stop throwing up.
Cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Cannabis use that actually causes vomiting, unexplained abdominal pain, severe repeated nausea.
Rates of cannabinoid hyperemesis have risen so quickly that it's gone from a rarity 20 years ago to afflicting 6 million Americans today. Patients can vomit so much that they eventually lose teeth from all the stomach acid they throw up. But tooth-melting vomit is just the tip of the iceberg.
Severe psychotic breaks that require police involvement, physical restraints, spit masks, and antipsychotic medications.
That's right. Cannabis users develop psychosis at 5 times the rate of non-users. The National Institutes of Health estimates that 30% of schizophrenia cases among men aged 21 through 30 are caused by cannabis. To be sure, on many health effects, we simply don't know the answer. What about the second issue? The idea that cannabis isn't like all those other drugs that cause addiction or problem use. Unfortunately, bullshit. Dr. Wilson Compton, deputy director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, told the New York Times that almost everybody that uses cannabis daily is reporting problems with it. Almost everybody. 18 million Americans now show signs of a cannabis substance use disorder. And yes, this is a direct result of all the legal changes. Under 1 million Americans used cannabis daily 30 years ago, and today it's that 18 million figure. And among Americans who use some intoxicating substance daily, more now use cannabis than alcohol. So yes, it's absolutely a case of massive and rapidly growing problem use. And that brings us to the third issue, whether we really know what we're dealing with here, because we don't. Cannabis products today are anywhere from 4 to 24 times stronger in terms of the concentration of the psychoactive compound in it, THC, than the weed you might have scored 25 years ago. You can easily take a tiny edible that's way more powerful than a whole bowl you might have smoked a couple of decades ago. Look, if you're among the many Americans who like a little pot now and then, or you're among the advocates who say, well, we really need to do a lot more scientific research so we can understand how to deal with this substance, that's reasonable. But make no mistake, the president reclassifying the drug, or big businesses lobbying to remove what few restrictions still remain, isn't about letting people have a good time with a light drug. It's about politics, big money, and an incredibly powerful new form of this substance that we really don't understand. If there's good news, it's that I didn't even tell you the twisted story of how the federal government mistakenly legalized synthetic cannabis nationwide and then quietly fixed it in November 2025 by closing the loophole. And people from both parties agreed. So elected leaders do understand that they've got a problem, and they've shown that they can put some of the genie back in the bottle. Bong? And that also goes to show that anyone who's still using the same arguments from 20 years ago, or who's conveniently ignoring all of these facts, is high on their own supply.
Every time I watch that, I just can't help but laugh. That little kid saying bullshit just makes me laugh every single time. Another great segment. Awesome as always. Like, it's just, wow. You continue to knock these things out. Fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wish there was less bullshit to deal with, but this is the world we live in. Let's transition. It's our weekly dose of hope. We're going off menu this week because we usually in this segment each choose something that's a point of light in our sky and talk about it a little bit to try and inject a little bit of upbeat flavor into the end of our week. This week, we're going to try to do a little bit of a pivot, as mentioned at the top of the show. The tragic death of Rob Reiner. There's no happy element of this, but his movies brought a ton of happiness to all of us across the political spectrum. So we thought what we'd do is focus on that positive that we enjoyed and we can enjoy together no matter what our political preferences are. So we bring you our choices for our top 5 Rob Reiner movies. Matt, you want to go first?
Yes. All right. There were a lot to choose from. I even thought about digging into some where he was an actor because we think of him as producer, we think of him as director, but wow, he's been in a lot of things and just legendary. But I started with This Is Spinal Tap, classic movie. Then I went to, this is kind of one of the things I love about New York, When Harry Met Sally, Princess Bride, number 3. My number 2 best Rob Reiner movies, The American President. And this one, number 1, should be no surprise. I've quoted it here before. I've shown clips. It's A Few Good Men. That is the best Rob Reiner movie of all time.
Okay, so you went 5-1. I will do the same thing. All right. We have the same list, but I have a slightly different order. I went American President number 5, and the reason that this beat out Stand By Me on my top 5 list is because this is a politics show, and this was the movie that actually birthed The West Wing, which is what got Democrats like me through the George W. Bush years. It was our methadone, and so you got to give a nod to The American President. I went number 4 with The Princess Bride, a fairy tale classic, the kind of thing that you can watch with your kids. I watch with my daughter. The whole family can love. Number 3, A Few Good Men, reinvigorated the courtroom drama, epic and timeless. Number 2, This Is Spinal Tap, again, invented the rockumentary genre, which led to The Office, Parks and Rec, Modern Family, all kinds of cultural classics, all born out of This Is Spinal Tap. And finally, I know I'm a man's man. I'm a He-Man, muscular, hairy type, but I had to go When Harry Met Sally because I am a native New Yorker. They filmed parts of it in the neighborhoods, the bookstores that I went to as a kid. And like, it invented the modern rom-com. Like, you got to appreciate that.
Look, A Few Good Men, there's nothing that beats that movie. But When Harry Met Sally is just classic. Like, it is a classic comedy on all levels, right? It feels so New York. Every piece of that feels New York.
And here are the two of us doing the white man's overbite right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Isn't that what essentially the Trump dance?
It's not much different. Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, I bet he would put that as his number 1. But American President, you're right, because it did spawn The West Wing. What a classic combination of actors there. But that's why I also get to A Few Good Men, because that is just perfect acting. I don't think he blinks. When you look at that, it just feels intense coming. I saw that one in the movie theater, and I just went, wow.
The only thing that dings The American President for me is that people who are actual like professionals in politics, no one talks like that. And that was my problem with The West Wing. I couldn't actually really watch The West Wing. It's no one talks like that. Aaron Sorkin, he's great. But yes, it is true. It's hard to dispute A Few Good Men. You can't go wrong with any of these. And we hope that this little reminder on these classics will give a little bit of uplift, a little dose of hope at the end of what has been, let's face it, not the greatest week. And we hope that having us in your feed is a welcome sight. You want us on that phone. You need us on that phone. For Matt, I'm Matt. We hope you've been rehabbed. We'll see you next week.